Every day, trillions of dollars worth of goods, loans, and investments move around the world, and most of it moves in one currency, the US dollar. This is the story of a provocative legal argument that the dollar-centered monetary system works like an unwritten constitution for the global economy, one that international law has never really acknowledged, let alone checked. International economic law is famously dense. Trade is governed by the World Trade Organization. Investment is protected by nearly 2,500 treaties. But ask what law governs the world's money, the currency at the center of it all, and the answer is almost none. In a new article, legal scholar Kevin Crowe calls this a constitutive monetary blind spot. The argument starts with a distinction between two ideas. Dollar prominence is the ubiquity of the dollar, its use in invoicing trade, settling contracts, and saving in reserves. Dollar dominance is something more, the systemic power that flows from that ubiquity. Prominence is a fact about usage. Dominance is a fact about power, and power, Crowe argues, is exactly what law is supposed to govern. How did we get here? At Bretton Woods in 1944, the post-war monetary system was deliberately built around the dollar, every currency pegged to it, and the dollar pegged to gold. When that gold link snapped in 1971, you might expect the dollar's role to fade. Instead, the opposite happened. Oil, commodities, bonds, and bank loans stayed priced in dollars by convention, and the dollar's centrality deepened, now without any formal legal anchor at all. The numbers are striking. Roughly half of global trade is invoiced in dollars, even when no American is involved. About 60% of cross-border loans and international debt securities are dollar-denominated. Close to 2/3 of central bank reserves are held in dollars, and around half of the world's sovereign bonds are governed by the law of a single American state, New York. Crowe's central claim is that this isn't just a market outcome, it's a legal construction. 3 legal levers hold the system together. First, the U.S. Federal Reserve's discretionary power to supply dollars to the world in a crisis. Second, the dominance of New York law in global financial contracts. And third, a permissive baseline in public international law, which simply leaves monetary power alone. Together, he calls these the de facto monetary constitution. That constitution becomes visible in a crisis. When global finance froze in 2008, and again in 2020, the world scrambled for dollars, and salvation came not from any international institution, but from the Federal Reserve. Its swap lines rescued a select club of allied central banks. A second tier could borrow against their U.S. Treasury holdings. Everyone else was left with the IMF's conditional loans or costly self-insurance. Access to emergency money tracks geopolitical alignment, not any legal right. For the United States, this system confers what a French finance minister once called an exorbitant privilege: the ability to borrow cheaply in its own currency, run persistent deficits, and impose financial sanctions that reach almost anywhere on Earth, because nearly every global bank must, eventually, clear dollars through New York. Whether privilege or, as some argue, burden, the dollar's role gives one country structural power over all the others, with minimal formal constraint. Meanwhile, everyone else lives under a very different rulebook. When the Fed raises rates and capital flees an emerging economy, its options are legally fenced in. Let the currency fall and risk accusations of manipulation. Impose capital controls and risk breaching trade and investment treaties. The asymmetry is normalized. The issuer of the world's currency faces almost no international discipline, while the countries adjusting to its decisions face plenty. Argentina's collapse in 2001 shows what this means in practice. Facing catastrophe, it broke its dollar peg, froze bank deposits, and restructured its debt. For acting in an emergency, it was hit with more than 40 investor arbitration claims and years of litigation in New York courts, over $9 billion in awards and settlements, while over half its population fell into poverty. Trade law said keep markets open. Investment law said honor investor rights. The IMF said stabilize at all costs. A country in crisis steps on legal landmines whichever way it turns. Why is the law blind to all this? Crowe traces it to old economic dogmas that got frozen into legal doctrine: Ricardo's comparative advantage, which imagined trade without money, and the monetarist idea that money is neutral, a veil over the real economy. Economics has long since moved on, but treaties are sticky. The law still treats currency hierarchy as background fact, rather than as a structure the law itself helps sustain. This is the heart of the thesis. A constitution, in Crow's sense, isn't a written document. It's the set of entrenched arrangements that supply the baseline rules everything else runs on. By that measure, the Fed's swap network, New York's contract law, and international law's silence function as the global economy's real monetary constitution. But unlike a true constitution, it constitutes power without constraining it, and no one outside the United States ever voted for it. And the stakes are rising. Washington has floated a so-called Mar-a-Lago Accord to engineer the dollar downward while keeping its privileges. China is building alternative payment rails. Even new U.S. stablecoin law extends dollar primacy into digital money. Great power competition, Crow argues, now runs straight through the monetary system, and there are almost no legal rules for the contest. So what would change look like? Crow sketches a jurisprudence of money built on principles like symmetry, holding reserve issuers and reserve holders to comparable disciplines, proportionality, matching monetary power with accountability for its spillovers, and crisis time deference, protecting states' good faith emergency measures from legal attack. The goal is not to dethrone the dollar, but to make monetary power visible and governable. Money, this article reminds us, is not a neutral backdrop to the global economy. It is a legal institution, built by choices and changeable by them. The question is whether international law will find the language for that reality before the next crisis writes the rules instead. This video was based on the article Prominence and Dominance, the U.S. Dollar and the de facto Global Monetary Constitution by Kevin Crow.